Check, check. All right, let's see. Is this URL shareable? Here, share. Copy. All right, let's see if we can get some folks to join in on here. Here, ask me anything. CSS Carousels on YouTube. Boom. Blasty, blasty. And another little blasty, blasty. Okay, I see a chat sidebar. I hope the mic is coming through good. We've got a carousel demo here. I don't know if this is all working. I haven't streamed in a minute. It's like this seemed like a good time. Okay, so I see there's at least somebody here. Can y'all chat? Like, hi, ask me anything. Hey, contrast looks really flat. Yeah, I agree. The stream of my video is very bad. I don't know why that is. It's OBS. I'm just trying to overlay it all together. And it does look, it's like something coming out of OBS into YouTube looks pretty terrible. Let's see if I can change some of the output settings. Let's see. Standard quality. Let's see, is that drafted okay? Any changes? No. Where else could I change the quality of the video output? Let's see. I don't know. Too many settings in here. I think it's going to be here because it looks color related. Something about the setting here. No, I don't really have actually. There's like a whole lot of settings, but I can't change a lot of them. I don't think it's because I'm live. Yeah, it kind of sucks the videos like that, but you know, whatever. I don't really know what to do to change that. It definitely is coming out of OBS, but I don't know. It's I guess, yeah, the demos even don't look that great. The frame rate's kind of low. Oh yeah, and the colors are all washed out in like a blue. What? Yeah, they're not even blue. They're like a faded purple. That's lame. I wonder if I can just pivot to that. Like, what is, okay, that looks good. And then can I change my input camera? Come on, that would be cool. Then I could just get off of OBS entirely. Come on, let me change the source. Let me change it. And well, let me change it there. Gonna change it over here. I mean, go ahead and shoot questions if you have them too. We can just dig into stuff because that should be a better share. And the colors are slightly better, but it's kind of awkward seeing the double. Okay. Thank you, Ship Happens. Appreciate that. Where can I find? It sounds like y'all can hear me, which is nice. I mean, considering I can see where it says the webcam, but it's like grayed out. It's like once I started the stream on YouTube, it doesn't want to let me change it. I could just get rid of this and put me here or whatever. It's not that awesome, but it's better than nothing. All right, well, any initial questions? Because there's so many demos, and they show a lot of different features. Like this virtualization one is pretty awesome. There is, I don't know, I think there's 1,000 items in here or something like that. And you can see the browser makes dots for every single one of them, maintains their state, snaps them, gives me buttons. I mean, everything's here for me to do. And the images are lazy loaded. And we're using content visibility. So there's like all sorts of really cool optimizations in this particular demo. Here, let me just do this so it's not so lame. Here, delete that. There. Because why not? Okay, that's better-ish. Okay, any questions rolling in yet? I mean, this is pretty wild stuff. So I'm kind of assuming you will have questions. And that was what the AMA was for. So I'm like, join in, ask me what you need to about this thing. Let's see. So yes, this one, underneath each of the titles, it tells you all of the different features that were used. It actually doesn't tell you all of them because it would be super overwhelming, but it kind of hits on the main ones. Like this one's got scroll buttons. We can see them on the sides. It's got scroll markers. Indicated here is dots. That can be way more than dots. We're using scroll state queries to highlight this one blue. Here we have curious. Okay, M16. Will this be focusing largely on new tech or tech which already has large market adoption? Let's see. Well, carousels are everywhere. So one of the ideas is carousels are everywhere. There's like no accessibility standards. There's no standards about how to interact with them. So it's like as a user, every single carousel you interact with, it's like a new learning experience. You can see even in some of the comments, people are like, how long until the mouse can press and fling? And that's like not normal scroll at all, but it is kind of normal for carousels, or some users have become accustomed to interacting with carousels that way. The idea is to make it usable for everyone by normalizing these and making the browser take care of all this stuff, so we don't have to code so much. Like a lot of things with carousels is they're wildly terrible keyboard accessibility, and a lot of carousels don't even have good touch gestures. Like you try to swipe them and they wouldn't swipe. You'd have to use the buttons. I don't know, there's all this like weird stuff. And so what we wanted to do is, yes, look at every carousel that anybody's using, and there's tons of them everywhere, find all the features that are in them, and find the ways that we can upgrade a scroller to support those types of features, because that's all somebody's doing. They're taking a list. Like you'll notice the HTML for like tons of these demos, it's just a UL and LIs. And so once you have a UL and it's just a list, to a screen reader, it's just a list, right? You're like, look at these 20 items. But to a user on a keyboard who has to tab, if all of those are focusable, you'd have to tab through all 20 of them just to get underneath the carousel. And so most developers don't inert content or don't manage tab index, and there's all sorts of stuff there. There's also, once you have tab index in there, you need to articulate to screen readers, if you want, that what position they're in, because it can feel like a radio, especially if you have the dot navigation. Then dot navigation often gets skipped over with accessibility too. So yeah, we're looking for anybody using carousels. So this is going to be your app markets, your Netflixes, your e-commerce sites. So here I could go to an e-commerce example. We got products. Like you're not limited to having dots. You can have images. And so here, and you can see that stateful. So as I swipe, I can use the images just like an e-commerce thing. There's just no JavaScript here. So this means like it's going to load faster. There's less to download. Users with JavaScript disabled get the carousel on your product landing page. There's like all sorts of cool reasons there. So let's see, M16, how'd I do? Sitting here nodding like you can see me. Glad I tuned in. Love this stuff. Okay, cool. It's like beyond that too. There's so many cool features in here. Maybe we'll get into them here. So let's see, ship happens. Touch on carousels almost always is terrible. You expect them to behave like scrolling vertically. Yeah, another thing too is if they do add touch behaviors, a lot of them will use JavaScript to watch touch events and then translate X, which feels like an optimization. You're like, yeah, I'm gonna do this off the main thread. I'll just listen to the scroller on the main thread, and then all the GPU accelerated gestures will be there. But the thing is, as soon as you do that, there's two big things start to suck. The first one is like if you pan back and forth, you're in the uncanny valley. That's not how scrollers tend to feel. And so you've already taken them out of their normal scroll experience into your weird one. And then as soon as you fling, that's when it's totally it feels weird. Like on iOS, they have, I call it like a air hockey table scrollers, where you feel like you push a puck along the air hockey table on an iOS device, and it's so soft, so smooth, so floaty. And then you get on other systems and it's not the same. You get on Linux, it's not the same. You get on Windows, it's not the same. People want the familiar scroll experience when they're there. They don't want iOS's floaty experience everywhere. And so what's nice is if you use the native scroller and you add these features in here, then all the interactions become natural. Even the scroll bars. I left the scroll bars in a lot of the demos because I like scroll bars. Why would I get rid of them? I mean, anyway, so it's up to you and your designers, but that's kind of what's nice too, is you can reduce the scroll bar by adding your own buttons and adding the dots. It's kind of like you're subsidizing. I still think in a lot of cases you can have both, but Yeah, this is a good example for people to see though. Also notice how the one coming in fades in and the other one fades out. That's using scroll state queries. Really easy to know if you're the snapped item. You also don't have to use snap with carousel. If you just have a free floating scroller with no snap points, you can still generate markers for all those items like dots or thumbnails, and they'll still highlight when that item comes into view. The browser with a carousel and these scroll markers and scroll buttons will always consider that something is kind of snapped. It's almost like a radio list. There's always something selected, and the browser will tell you which one it thinks is best in that particular case. Let's see, do I have any free floating scrollable demos in here? I do. I have curved, but you know what? Curved does not have markers. But if we did have scroll markers in here, and these are lazy loaded, so we got lazy loaded images. This is really just a mask. It's totally just an illusion. It's like a cheap way to get the effect. I still think it looks cool. Anyway, if we had markers in here, even though there's no, oh, I guess there's scroll snapping on this demo. Dang it. Anyway, they still can be target current, and it's just a CSS selector. That's really handy. One of the things about buttons that confuse people a lot in the beginning is that they don't move item by item, at least not by default. They scroll by pages. They scroll about 85% of the page. That's why if I'm looking at this many, you can imagine like right about here. So it's going to scroll from here over to here. And once it does that too, it's going to look to see if there's another snap item. And it did. It found one. So it actually paged the entire page because scroll snap kind of pulled it across that last little layer there. So anyway, the scroll buttons are, they nudge this. They're almost like page up, page down. And you can have vertical ones. Here, check out this demo. We have a bi-directional grid with scroll buttons and scroll markers. So look, we have a marker for all the items, and I can use scroll state to see which element is snapped on X and which element is snapped on Y, but then the browser is still exposing a single target current for me to use. And as I scroll, we can see it all adjust. I can use the mini map and navigate to one. The scroller goes to it. This is pretty cool stuff. So I got up and down, and look at the buttons at the top and the bottom. If I go to the bottom, disabled. Go to the top, it's disabled. I go all the way to the right, it's disabled. All the way to the left. We have so this isn't just a carousel. This is what I mean. Like scroll snap wasn't invented just for carousels. We call a lot of this CSS carousel work, but it's mostly just making scrollers more rad. With all these kind of, I call them affordances, right? So now we have button affordances and we have marker affordances. A really cool thing to do in the TV series demo is that the markers can be text. So here I have a marker indicating a section of episodes, season 1, and another marker for another season indicating here. And these are generated by the browser and managed in stateful. So look, if I start to scroll over and now I'm in the season 1 episode, it's going to highlight for me automatically. I scroll back into season 2 highlights automatically for me. So really cool stuff. The browser is managing a stateful. This is also why you can make a scroll spy. Check out the scroll spy. Super duper easy. How many times have you had to code this up? I just want to know when this section is in view and highlight the item, dang it. And now it's a few lines of CSS. And you can animate it. You can click them to go to these things. They're fully functional. It's really, really sweet stuff. Okay, any other questions? Come on, I know you got questions. This stuff is gnarly. Like we can go look at the tabs. Who thinks tabs aren't carousels? Because I will sit here and try to convince you that tabs and carousels are nearly identical. I laugh internally here at Google. I call them tabicels or carotabs because I'm like, they're so similar. Like, look, what's so different about these? They're not dots. They're still scroll markers. They're still just things that help me navigate a list of content. The major difference here is that if I tab in with my keyboard, I can use the arrows left and right, which you can also use in the dots. And then when I tab, I go into the content because I've used CSS inert to take the items that like aren't in view and make them unfocusable. So naturally, the only place to go after you've been in the tab strip, the tab list, is to go into the focusable content. In this case, it's a scroller. And I can navigate freely inside of here. So no scroll buttons here, just scroll markers that are using text and then looking like tabs, which is kind of neat. So that's that one. So yeah, we saw scroll ITV series in that one. And then we also saw the one that was images too, just like the thumbnails in the product. I think it's important to know that these aren't just for dots. So kind of cool. What else we got? You can, of course, do lots of scroll-driven animations in here. So you can see these things are in 3D. Like the text is a little out in front. You can see I'm still using scroll state. So I'm using scroll-driven animations, scroll state, 3D, and perspective, and building a very like engaging and high-performance 3D scroller. So you could do this for, you could make it really wild if you wanted to. Dev Vera just arrived. The production version of Chrome does not support the CSS features required for this 100% CSS carousel. It's in Chrome 135, so you just got to check out which version you're at. I am at version, well, I'm in Canary right now, which is 136, so I'm like way ahead. But it's coming out in stable 135, which I think, when does stable come out? Can I see chromestatus.com? Check for stable is March 5th to March 20th. So you might just have an update chilling. Oh, stable in 6 days. Okay, so beta ends pretty much in the next couple days, and stable is March 26th. So next week, all this stuff will be in your browser. Dev Vera, thanks for asking. Let's see what else is in here that's super interesting. This one is, I see this on the Android homepage all the time. It's just like a little widget version. There's no reason you can't just make a tiny one. So these are just dots generated off of 2 scroll snap points that represent from some weather. Like, it's awesome. Yeah, CSS Carousel soon. It's going to be good. I saw a little typo. I knew what you meant. It's all good. Okay, so let's see. We have list, we have cards. Oh, video. Like, this was just because I know that people are going to try it, but also look at the pagination counter. This is actually using scroll-driven animations. You could probably figure out a way to do it with the carousel features also. But it's kind of interesting. I'm using a counter, so I'm dynamically counting how many items are in there, and then using scroll-driven animations to increment or decrement the counter to match the pagination on there, which is kind of cool. Justin O'Neill, what are the differences between something like this and scroll snap? Well, many of my demos use scroll snap. This one uses scroll snap. And then all of the fancy stuff is done with scroll-driven animation. I think of scroll snap very often as a skeletal feature, and then scroll-driven animation, scroll state queries, just anything animated in visual during scroll as like a skin, a layer. Scroll snap points, you really want to set them up in a very skeletal way. You don't want to change the item that is snapped. You always want to change a child of that item. It's very much like container queries, where if you change the item that's snapped, it's now you're changing the thing it's trying to snap to, and the browser can jiggle and wiggle and try to get there. So I think of scroll snap as structural, and then I think of the scroll markers and scroll buttons as affordances that you're adding to a scroller to make things more discoverable. Like a lot of times we talk about a scroll hint with a scroller, because you'll look at a scroller and be like, how am I supposed to know it's a scroller? You're like, well, the content's cut off a little bit. And you're like, well, that's not good enough. How about you add a shadow? So there's like shadow techniques. There's arrow techniques that point down, right? And then as soon as you scroll down, the arrow disappears. These are all scroll hints. Well, scroll buttons are scroll hints. They're just sitting there indicating that this can be interacted with, and it has a direction to go. In fact, it's nice that they disable, because look, now it can hint that you can't go forward anymore. So this is why it's an affordance. You're just adding this added affordance onto a scroller. And then the dots help content discovery. You're calling out important landmarks that are inside of there. It could be every item. It could be some items. And so you're able to promote and provide a hint and give the affordance of discovery there. So you're kind of taking a long list and making all the items slightly easier to be discovered. So I think that's a little bit how it's different from a scroll snap, is that these are affordances, and scroll snap is, yeah, I guess it's kind of like scroll snap is an affordance, right? You're making sure that where scroll rests is always somewhere elegant. And it's kind of like scroll markers. So scroll markers and scroll snap definitely share the strategy of highlighting an important moment in the scroller. You're just like, this is a great landmark. Why don't you snap here? This is a great landmark. Why don't we promote it and add a thumbnail underneath the scroller so we know, so people know it's there, type of deal. Cool. Nice, getting thumbs up, liking the answer. All right, cool. What else is in here? Oh, App Switcher. This one's just fun to do. It's mostly a scroll-driven animation, but you get the buttons, right? It's just an affordance. Maybe this demo loaded and you looked at it and were like, What's it do? And now that there's a button, you're like, I don't know, but there's a button. You're like, it scrolls, and you can have people realize that it scrolls. What else? I did the virtualization one in the beginning. Oh, testimonials. This one's classic. That is so classic. So it's just a scroll snap area. This one though, I borrowed from other e-commerce sites where they don't show the arrows unless you hover or focus inside. So as I hover inside of it, I can use CSS, right? Okay, here, this whole site has no JavaScript anywhere in it, by the way, which is kind of fun. But I hover inside, I get to see the buttons. I can use the buttons. I can also focus down into the content and see the buttons. See how the button is still here, even though my mouse is outside of there? I can use the arrows to navigate. I've added a little bit of a soft mask so that as these scroll in and out, they have some softness to them. It's just totally optional fluff. It's fluff. This is all fluff on top of just a scroll snap area. 3 scroll snap points, 3 testimonials with a bunch of nifty affordances and some scroll-driven animation in there. Cool. When using Shift plus scroll wheel, some of the easing seems kind of jerky. Okay, so are you on a stepped scroll wheel or a smooth scroll wheel? But yes, so people who don't know, on Windows and other operating systems where horizontal scroll is not as integrated as like a touchpad is on Mac and the mice of a Mac are all very horizontal scrolling friendly, whereas Windows, you got to hold Shift to do a horizontal scroll. Unless you're using a trackpad, which a trackpad can behave just like you'd want it to. And Ship Happens is saying that Shift plus scroll wheel has some funkier easing on Windows. The main dev who works on Carousel uses Windows, and they use Shift scroll a lot. I'd be surprised if there were issues here, but if you turn off the stepper, it works better. So yeah, steppers are a double-edged sword, right? Like steppers have their moments where they're like awesome, and then you have steppers when you're like using a scroll-driven animation, and you're like, I really don't like my stepper now. And that's why some mice, you click it, now you're smooth scrolling. You click it, go back to step mode. I mean, it's just, there you go, more affordances. We want the user to be in control and feel like they can navigate this stuff. So yeah, let me know if things are happening weird there. All right, we got Kofi Bonsai. Hi, Adam. Are these significantly different from the carousel you built in the past with GUI? They are not significantly difficult, but excellent question. So if folks don't know, GUI challenges, I used to build a lot of UI on there, and just to kind of explain my thinking and being very considerate of a user the whole time. This work in GUI challenges was part of my work 3 years ago in researching what are the best practices. And that's why we pulled open the Why ARIA guidelines. I went in and I wrote a lot. It took piles of JavaScript to make this carousel accessible. Like just looking at some of these items in here, we've got, ARIA labels, ARIA set size, ARIA selected, tab index. So I had to manage my own focus management, my own roving index, my own tab list logic. I used buttons here, and honestly, I've learned now that these should probably be links because they just scroll a scroller versus the scroll buttons, which are buttons. So yeah, the GUI challenges gave us a lot of research into what is the target goal, and then we wanted to make CSS generate all these things for users so that there was no JavaScript involved, and that the accessibility was easy. Because if the browser is managing the elements, then it can manage their accessibility. And you can see that too in the accessibility tree view of here in the carousel. Accessibility man, we go down to the list. So remember I said most of these are just a UL and an LI. So I've got a list of testimonials. There's 3 list items. The tab list represents the dots. The tab list has focusable and managing its state. Look, this one says it's selected. And then here's our list item with our figure and our block quote and our fig caption and stuff. And all the content is in there. So this is all taken care of by the browser. Look, real buttons, real tabs. And the tabs actually behave like a link, which is why when you click one, boop, they scroll to an item. So did I answer your question? So it's like, are they different? They are different. We learned things, and it's much better. Again, too, we also had accessibility engineers build the accessibility into Chrome so that when Chrome sees these carousel features and when it generates these buttons and it generates these links and it generates state, all of that is appropriately put into the accessibility tree and given to screen readers in a format that they know what this is. So that screen readers are not surprised by carousel. In fact, there wasn't even a whole lot of new things to do. It was mostly just mapping these generated elements back into semantic elements and then just giving that back to screen readers. So it's kind of cool. Awesome. I'm glad that was a strong answer for you, Ko-Fi Bonsai. That's good stuff. Let's see, what else have we not looked at? The media player is fun. I think it's broken right now. Yeah, the little title's broken, but I'll go into this one in a second. Here we go. Does this support forward and back nav buttons? Is there any news on JavaScript methods to jump relatively between scroll snap points? Excellent question, Iron Flare. There's two questions in here. Does this support backward and forward navigation buttons? I'm assuming you mean the browser navigation buttons. If that's what you mean, no. And also, I would call it a feature that the clicking, oh, here, this isn't a good one because I've lost the markers. They're invisible. We'll talk about it later. But when I click this isn't setting a URL state to do, it's not fragment navigation in a traditional sense. You don't have to have IDs on these and then click to go to the ID, which would change your URL state, which would make the back button do something. And I think that would be annoying as hell if I like clicked 4 dots and then hit the back button. I was like, oh, now I'm going back through my dots. But you could wire that up if you wanted that with JavaScript. So if that's a desirable stateful feature, or if you could also just put IDs on them and then share a deep link. So I don't know. There's all sorts of options there for back forward handling. Let's see, it meant on the sides of the gallery, but browser buttons could be neat too. Oh yeah, on the sides of the gallery. Yeah, forward and backward and up and down. You call them left and right, and they'll scroll the scroller left or right or up or down. Hopefully that answers it. The second question though you had, to jump between scroll snap points through with JavaScript, that is not complete yet. So that has been spec'd for about 4 or 5 years. What we're probably going to go with is a scroll to with options. So you'll be able to pass more options in the current native APIs that we have for asking for scroll. And in there, you'll be able to say snap next, snap previous, and sort of emulate a lot of the carousel APIs that we have from JavaScript. Because another part of this carousel work is version 2 will also feature the ability for you to bring your own elements. So if you don't want CSS to make the buttons or CSS to make the dots, a future version, you can create your own dots, create your own links, create your own buttons, and tell the browser, these are my carousel buttons, at which point it will do all the glue work. This is important for people who have a React button that's 4 divs deep, and like they can't map that to a pseudo element in CSS. And so then they'll be able to just use their button component they have now and then attach it to the scroller. But yeah, back to the question about scroll snap points in JavaScript API. It's defined, just no one has implemented it yet. I don't think it'll be that hard, but we ended up tackling the CSS generated buttons and stuff first because it's going to make for more accessible carousels on the web. If we let people run wild, it's more likely that they'll mess something up, whereas the CSS generated ones are going to be better. So we'll fill in these other JavaScript APIs and these more advanced use cases a little bit later. Justin O'Neill says, the CSS lol. I don't know what you're referencing, but I'm down. Let's talk about it. What did you see that was wild? There is some wild stuff in here. Okay, let's see. Okay, cool. I remember reading the spec you wrote for that. Thanks. Yeah, it's still the same spec. It's the scroll snap explainers. Scroll snap explainers. Yeah, I think it might have moved the repo. But yeah, we already did snap changing. Those are implemented. Scroll art is implemented. It has a new name. And that's in some of the demos too. And that's why some of the demos load and they load not the first item, which I think is really important. The cards want that. Lots of them do that. You load the user in the middle, right? And you load them in the middle on first paint. Not lazy, not showing up with JavaScript, not some weird timing. It's timed perfect. In fact, that's the only way to get it to work is if it is first paint and nothing else interrupts it. So it's very precise and very unintrusive. So it's only going to do that in some good special circumstances. But yeah, here's explainers. We scroll to options, the snap additions. This is the one that's probably going to land, and you'll get an API like this. Scroll to snap next. This means if I hit the end, go back to the beginning. smoothly go there, instantly go there. And then the API needs to handle bidirectional scenarios like we saw earlier in this one. This needs to be, you need to be able to snap up and snap down and snap left and snap right. Cool. I'm going to, interesting about this, M16 says, interesting about accessibility. It's often overlooked that removing list styling removes list semantics normally. So if that's been tackled here and isn't an issue with this, then that's great. That's a good point. So even though I'm using a ULLI, if I say the list style type is none, I could be stripping out all of that accessibility information. So I better be replacing it well and having easy to discover content, which if we looked in the accessibility tree earlier, like we'll go back to cards, Command I, go to accessibility view, we do still see a list. In this case, well, this one's a list with articles. So this one is a good example where I didn't ULI, and this one will be an example of ULLI. It's a list with list items. A very good point, M16. Justin says, I might have missed this in the beginning, but this is just all done with C. Yeah, there's no JavaScript anywhere, and there's no HTML element introduced. Conceptually, the idea was, if CSS has all these things, then the user agent style sheet just needs to target a carousel and add buttons and markers onto it with CSS. To say an element is not far away. The problem is the HTML spec is much harder to get edits into, especially a very complex element like this. So going the CSS route allowed us to kind of circumvent HTML spec issues while still fulfilling a good user experience. So we do intend to backfill. We intend also to make a web component that just sort of like looks to see if the browser has the features. If it does, then it uses the CSS features. If the browser doesn't, then it goes back to basically the GUI challenge code. So the GUI challenges could pretty easily right now upgrade to the CSS variant if it's available and backfill all through a web component, making it trivial for everyone to implement. The only bummer there is you still need JavaScript and there's a hydration flow. So there's like hits for certain things and we'll see where that goes. But we are interested in eventually making it even easier, like a carousel element. We'll see. We'll see if this trend continues of just like horizontal media scrollers. I assume so. They're everywhere. If anything, they're getting more popular. Okay, can you scroll to an anchor position with an href? Like perhaps deep linking to a position. Yeah, of course. It's still just a scroller. If there's an item with an ID in there, you can put it in the hash bar, hit enter. You can have a link that goes to it. One of the demos, the Scroll Spy demo, is a good example where imagine your sidebar with your sidebar with your links that are scroll bar is a totally separate element than your scroller. So what are you going to do there? The idea is that variant, the V2 variant, where you can bring your own elements and the browser will attach them. You have a side nav of links. Those links are fragment links with hash URLs into your content. The browser can look at those, match up the ID. The browser will do all the work to match it up, use the intersection observer, observe when this thing's in view, give that thing the target current selected state. It's going to be awesome. So for now, the browser is creating these links for you, but in the future, you can definitely bring your own. It's going to be really sweet. And so, yeah, as of right now, you could do that by yourself right now. It's just you could make a link that goes to a deep position in your scroller. No big deal. Referring to looking at the CSS for some of this side-by-side. I see. Here's a tip. If you do get into DevTools and you're looking at the carousel stuff, we did make it easier than it used to be. So you can now select the carousel button. So I just hit Command-Shift-C to get the element selector. I can select it, and you can find it here. Let's make this even easier to see. So here's my carousel. So first tip is, if you click the carousel and scroll to the bottom of the styles, you'll see the pseudo elements in here. So here's this scroll marker group. That's the thing containing dots or whatever it is that you're put in there. In this case, I have another selector that's saying this is not the vertical one. I basically made a utility style sheet so that you can add markers and dots to any scroller with just a class name. Very Tailwind style. And yeah, you can see here's all the styles for my scroll buttons. There's the size, 44 pixels, trying to be accessible. I'm using a icon font for the icon, but you could totally use SVG. Nothing stopping you from that. All sorts of transitions on the different interactions. And then you can also find the elements here. So here's the scroll buttons. They look like children of the carousel, but they are in fact siblings. Even though they're siblings, they can respond like container queries to the UL that they're attached to. So it's kind of really cool. In a lot of my scenarios, I used Anchor to put these somewhere because they're siblings. Like you imagine you got like a carousel and now you have buttons. They're going to be underneath it, not inside of it, in a block layout. And so then you can take anchoring and you're just like, okay, well then the carousel is my anchor and here's some things I want to just anchor them to that and put them on either side. Really easy to position. I also have grid demos where I use a CSS grid. I create, 3 columns, one with the main in the center, 2 on the edges for buttons, and you can just place the buttons in the side there using grid areas. It's really, really nice. So both those are strong ways to lay out your carousels. But yeah, you can see your pseudo elements in here, and then if you twirl open one of these two, you can also see a scroll marker. So you can see that this LI is asking for a scroll marker to get generated. The reality is the scroll marker is actually inside the scroll marker group, and the scroll marker group is actually a sibling to the carousel. So none of this new stuff is inside the carousel. They're all adjacent. Anyway, just kind of an interesting little note there. Was there, okay, so Iron Flare says, was there any conversation about implementing something like this in CSS spec versus HTML with a new element? Just thinking about CSS, this is the layer of paint versus HTML is the structural foundation. Yeah, a couple of like comments over here. Obviously, faster to implement it from the spec point, but in terms of separation of concerns, yes. So there were a couple, so like I was saying earlier too, when CSS is creating these things for you, we're able to do a lot of the accessibility work for developers. There's less foot guns with CSS pseudo elements. The pseudo elements were also a strong candidate versus an inline element because of their, what was I going to say? Well, okay, so we called out the accessibility. I mean, they can be shown and hidden. Oh, it's because they're an affordance. Like if you think about like a scroller in general, some scroll bars, like on Windows and stuff, they have arrows on them. They have arrows on either side of the scroller that you can push, just like a scroll button. And then the scroll thumbnail is almost like one big giant scroll marker thing. And so when you're thinking about these are affordances. Like we don't have inline elements for the scroll thumb and the buttons on a scroller. So in CSS, we don't have, and we're adding these buttons, we're adding these markers. They're very ephemeral. They can also change. Oh, here's one of really strong demos we haven't showed yet. This is one of the ones with like the most superpower in it too. Pages. Oh yeah, look, specs choice. The pages one is awesome because the browser will discover how many fit within a column and then generate dots off of that. If you had inline elements, you couldn't do this. So it's like literally this one's impossible with inline elements because you'd have to use JavaScript, look to see how many showed up in the column after a resize, count them, generate markers, and it'd be a huge pain in the butt. Same thing with the buttons. There's times when like maybe the user rotates the device and you're going to move the buttons to the top and the bottom instead of left and right. At which point you then now have to like display none your elements and all this stuff. So it's like wildly more adaptive and responsive by being generated by CSS. It can use all the superpowers of CSS. I mean, you can kind of argue that an inline element could be treated very similarly. But I think this demo right here is one of the more compelling ones that we can expand the size of it, fit more, and have less dots, which is kind of cool. So hopefully that felt like a decent explanation. And I think, and yeah, like I was saying, as we move forward into V2, we will let more inline elements behave similarly, and we'll do the attachment and the statefulness of them, which is kind of cool. All right, what time is it? Yeah, 12:09. That was a good 30-minute something. Oh yeah, it's 40 minutes. Thanks everybody for your questions. I really appreciate it. I hope we learned some stuff. Feel free to send me messages if you find bugs. I'm going to be continuing to work on the gallery, continuing to work on the configurator. Oh, we didn't even open the configurator. Well, I'll probably do something like this again just to get more feedback from y'all. Plus, I had office hours today and no one signed up, so this was office hours with y'all. So thanks for attending. I hope you learned something, and I'll see you around. Take care, everybody. Thanks, Astrid.